All right, kids, welcome back to another episode of Sit Crooked, Talk Straight. That means get comfy and no bullshit. I am Katie Myers.
And I'm Leanne Jameson.
And we have an action-packed episode for y'all today. We're going to somehow, get ready, we're going to somehow weave in together Mental Health Awareness Month, lesbian comedians. Does anybody actually listen to the news anymore? Or are we like watching and getting all of our facts, air quotes, facts from social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever it's called. Twitter. I used to call Jonathan a twat because anyway, so side story. So how are we going to link all these things together? Get ready, buckle up, because it all contains a connection.
It absolutely does. And that's how we usually roll. We have very different things that all link together.
And how we did it this morning was literally just like we do check-ins every time we record. Like we're just like, how are you? I'm good. How are you? I'm good. How are the kids? How's up? And then it was like, oh my gosh, lesbian comedians.
I need more lesbian comedians in my life.
naturally, that is what was said. And then right, like, so let's start at the top. Mental health awareness. We live in a society that is doing so much better as it relates to mental health awareness, mental health stigma, people being very vulnerable. I think Gen Alpha, is that what the youngest generation is right now? Gen Alpha is, the generation under us, we're millennials, old millennials, you're young, Gen X, millennial. But the generation, anyway, new generations are busting through, right? Like why spend time trying to figure out what they're called? The new generations are busting through all the barriers of like, we want to have balance in our lives and we want to have better mental health and we're going to take care of ourselves and we're going to say no to our employers when they tell us that we have to be on call 87 hours a day. Like there's so much. And so with October being mental health awareness, we wanted to kind of do like a shout out, but also Leanne and I have shared about our mental health struggles. We are no strangers. We dance that dance. We have perfected the moves. We are aficionados of mental health wellness, but also what brings you to a place, I think, often of needing mental health wellness, really needing it, is that you struggle with mental health illness. So there ain't no shame in that game. I am proud to be somebody who lives and actually thrives amidst depression and anxiety. And I have a little OCD traits in me and a history of an eating disorder. And so shout out to all the other depressed, anxious, hungry, and obsessed
body image issue. Like, I know, I swear, I think we mimic each other and just like all of the different experiences that we've had, because that's how, I would identify as part of me, right? Not all of me, but part of me is the anxiety, depression. I remember doing something on depression before on one of my social media, and somebody was like, you? Like, I would have never, I'm like, yes. Like, this is, it's in my family. I know that there is like a chemical deficiency. I totally get that in the Western world. And
big and here, folks. Big and here.
Well,
big and.
It's for me when I look at it, because again, it's like that, struggled with an eating disorder. I mean, still, right? Relationship with food, all that we have. It's recognizing the chemical, misfiring or depletion, or however you want to identify it. And there is a huge part that I have found, which has helped me thrive. And I don't know if this is your story as well, of just like when I realized how disconnected I was from my spirit and my truth and my authentic self, and not speaking up for myself. And when I get into that pattern, my depression is heavy and it disrupts every part of my life, where it's like, if there's just air quotes, this like chemical imbalance, I am better able to manage it and understand it when I'm also being true to myself. Right. So I want to look at it holistically how am I taking care of my body? What am I eating? What am I looking at? We're going to be talking about that, right? Like, what am I surrounding myself with? How am I, how am I aware of what I am dealing with and like what my
Mhm.
thoughts are? Um, is so important. But it really, for me, came down to being authentic with like just like completely embracing every single part of me, doing the deeper healing, and not just covering it up with medication. Medication helps, it's a supporter, and there's the other work too that is actually going to create the long lasting shift for you.
Amen, sister. Because you know that I am pro medication because I am on medication. So in
Right.
order to like work through my like acceptance and shame that I used to have about being on meds. But here's the thing, when I went through my mental breakdown 4 years ago now,
It was 4 years ago.
4 years ago, I was on medication and my depression ramped up to this level. And it wasn't until I took your course. I went to intensive outpatient treatment, mental health for depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And then I took Leanne's course. And I believe that that depressive episode, that particular time in my life, had nothing to do with chemical imbalances, had nothing to do with, it
Mm,
wasn't going to be fixed by putting another pill in my morning cocktail of medications. Like that wasn't going to fix it. I needed to get into alignment with my truth and stop living this basic lie of being this person, square peg, trying to fit into a round hole and shaving off massive parts of who I am, who I
mhm.
was, who I am today, trying to fit in. And so it wasn't until I did that additional work. And so I really don't believe in medication without doing the additional work. And then sometimes it's medication and sometimes it's the additional work, but in tandem, if you are on medication, there has to be the additional work. Um,
Absolutely.
so one of the things I ask my clients when I'm like working with them on their depression, and I usually will say like, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you feel you're at this week? And I'm like, okay, what did you do this week to move that number? Were you active, right? Because it takes action, y'all. Like we can't
Yeah.
wait for us to feel better and then we'll do the thing. We have
Ah,
to do the thing and then we'll feel better.
yes.
So my favorite thing to tell clients, I self-disclose and this is what I say. I'm like, all right, I go through Instagram and I look for two different sets of content. Pandas, dopey pandas that like, how the hell do they survive? If you've never seen a panda video on Instagram, don't walk, run now. You can even search like how are pandas still alive or how do pandas survive? Because they are the dopiest, dumbest, clumsiest creatures. And they're so stinky. But I laugh hysterically when I watch them like be in their dopey selves. I also laugh hysterically at comedians. I don't always share with my clients that I specifically enjoy lesbian comedians, but I do. There's something about lesbian comedians that make me so like joyful. They're hilarious. I relate with so much more than one would ever
Right.
guess. Like there's just so much to it that I'm like, everyone needs panda videos and lesbian comedians. Like that's what we need to be consuming. We need to be consuming. Talk about consumption earlier. Like, what are we putting into our bodies? What are we putting into our minds? What
Right.
are we putting? Y'all, the solution, if you are open and willing, pandas, lesbian comedians. Need I say more? That's our episode. That's our episode for today, folks.
That's it.
Thanks for stopping by.
Well, it is so true because I know it's so much, in my program, how we go through like the joy detox or
Yes.
the negativity detox, increase
And
joy,
the
right? To increase
joy
joy.
gym. We go to the joy gym. We lift the joy weights.
Yes, yeah, but it's just like, what are you listening to? And it's so funny because it's like I can feel myself because I have this like pattern that's not that healthy where I love in October, I know I'm not alone in this. I love to watch horror films, slasher films, like all the like right, and it's just so fucking heavy. It really is. So it's like I'm like, what am I doing to myself every single Halloween? I've been like sprinkling in. I was just like, I want to go to see this. I was so excited when I saw that Taylor Tomlinson was coming to Buffalo. Um, So it was just like I got my sisters who think very differently than me to actually agree to come to. And
It was a
I
risk.
just laughed the whole time. And yeah, it was again, it was like that like balance for me of like, oh, I just watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Let's go see Taylor Tomlinson.
I mean, who doesn't have that in their rotation? It's like Freddy Krueger, Hallmark holiday weddings,
Right, right.
Taylor Tomlinson, and then back to I don't even know it. Like right, like whatever.
Right,
Just
exactly. But having that awareness too of just like how we, when we do start to feel that heaviness of like, well, what
right.
am I surrounding myself with? Have I been really negative? Have I been just like around? And here's the thing too, for like highly sensitive people, which I would say a lot of the women that listen to us are, and probably a lot of the men that listen to us are, right? If
Oh,
you're a
no
man and
doubt.
you're listening to us, you're highly sensitive, which means we pick up other people's energy too. And with the state of affairs the way it is, um, so much happening, so many, oh gosh, so many things happening in the world, it can get really heavy. So, and I recognize this too whenever, so my husband has a very, he's highly sensitive, and he is very wrapped up in like a lot of different like heavy topics of like, do you know this is going on, and do you know this, we got into this conversation. So anytime he's like, because he works away for like weeks at a time, so whenever he's coming back, I'm like prepping myself, like what do I, and not like a negative way of just like, but recognizing that it takes more energy for me to just take care of myself. So like upping my game for this preparation, knowing what like I don't want to talk about with him, and like where I can get those needs met too, because it's
Mhm.
important for me to talk about it. So it's like, who are you surrounding yourself with? How are you taking care of yourself when you know that you're going into certain situations, or even like, this is something that I do a lot with like my clients is prepping for something that's happening that they know. Like if somebody has seasonal affective disorder, it's like, well, how are we going to, let's think outside the box, right?
Yes.
You know that you need, more sun and warm weather. So I like worked with somebody where she's able to travel for her job. There's multiple. What do I want to say? She works. She's an attorney. So she works at this office, and they have multiple offices all over the world, right? So I'm like, girl, what are you doing just staying in Tennessee, right? What are you
Right.
doing just staying in, that space, like when it gets darker and stuff like that. So she made a plan to like, she's like, oh my gosh. And a lot of times we just don't even think about it. We need sometimes that outsider to be like, oh my gosh, you can go anywhere. Yes, this is possible.
Right. Right.
So she made strategic plans to go to Miami a couple times, right? Like go and to be in spaces that really uplift her.
Yeah.
So it's like being able to be aware of it. And I think that's the difference between victimhood and empowerment is like, well,
Mhm.
I have this illness, and I know I get really depressed and blah blah blah, and you just sit in your shit rather than being aware of it and then doing something about it, right? If that's medication and therapy and or whatever it is, or holistic medicines. I
Yeah.
have another woman I work with that's always telling us like, okay, this is the season. You're going to want to take turmeric and ginger, and you put this together. Like she has like all
Love
these
it.
tinctures, and she's a nurse, So I
Love it.
love that. I love like all the different ways that we can take care of ourselves.
Mm.
So if you're choosing to sit in that victimhood, I want to recognize also it's a choice. Um, I know that sometimes it doesn't feel like that, right? Because it's just like it's really when you're in the depths of it. I know Katie knows like how hard it could be just to get up in the morning, right? To take a shower, to brush your teeth, to do the things. And like to recognize that a choice is actually empowerment rather than, how do I say, like,
Blaming.
when I what's that,
Blaming.
blaming, or yeah, right, or just like that victimhood of like, well, you just don't even understand, you don't know, right? And it's just like, actually I
Yeah.
do, right? And Like every single day we wake up with choice. I actually read this. I was reading before we met. I was reading the Course of Miracles, and I'll read like little bits, just like, and of course, what I opened it up to, I didn't realize that I left off, was like the power of choice. And it was talking about depression and it was talking about anxiety. I was like, of course it is.
The stars
Um,
align. Look at that.
but it was
Always.
like, but I know that when I wanted to just stay in my victim because the pros outweighed the cons, which is sounds really fucked up. Um, but it was like, well, people feel bad for me, or I get the, oh, are you okay today? Like whatever it is that I needed, I was receiving that when I sat in my shit, right? I was receiving that validation and the confirmation and all of the things that I needed. But what it did was actually create more victim and more depression and more, right? Like spiraling. So when I remember though, like when one of my therapists was like, well, this is your choice. I said, what the fuck? Like, what do you mean it's my choice? You think I want to sit in my shit? You think I want to sit in this? She was like, well, I remember being so angry with her. And
Mhm.
that was one of the most life-changing moments. Like, out of, there's so many different moments that we have that like you can pivot, right? So that was, I kept on going to her because I absolutely trusted her and loved her, and she challenged me. And that's what I needed, right? And it was scary because I got mad and it was shaking my foundation because this is what I saw with my mom for so long, right? My grandmother and my father, and like everybody was in a state of victimhood. So,
Yeah.
all right, I feel like I got on a soapbox there for a second. I'm just gonna breathe. Very bad.
I'm grateful for it because I think people are going to recognize, like relate to it and recognize themselves in different parts and pieces of what you shared. But the overarching theme is like empowerment. Like you don't have choice of getting depression or getting, I'm trying to like compare it to like other like medical like things, but we do energetically have choice over how we want to interact with that. And I'm kind of like in the middle ground of I believe in chemotherapy and I believe in Reiki. I believe in
Yes.
Prozac and I believe in
Same.
meditation. I
Same.
believe in taking, your diabetes medication and don't eat shit. Like, right.
Right.
Like there's both and so I just think there's so much relatability to what you shared because so many of us, when we're in the pits of it, we don't recognize that. Not because we don't necessarily want to, but we need to be reminded. We need somebody in our life to be a truth teller and be like, hey, let's not do this. Like I have a client right now who's grieving the loss of a relationship. And she is, it is taking her out. And I said, listen, I'm going to say this with so much love, but you need me right now to say something different than I have been saying. And I just gave her all this truth about, and she, at the end of it, she's still crying. And she's like, I know you're right. I know you're right. I know you're right. And like, she just needed to hear the reminder. So anyway, that's just a loving
Yes.
reminder. It's not to shame you or blame you if you are in it right now. I want to actually normalize a little bit of being in it because that's human nature, is to kind of like just be there and not know what to do. But then once you realize and recognize like, oh, I'm in it, then that's time for like a change or a pivot.
Yeah.
The last little note that I'll say, because we're wrapping up here in a sec, is that talking about consumption as well, not just from people around us and Instagram, but also the news and
Yes.
social media as it relates to the news.
Yeah.
I am going to just go out there and say it, that I believe a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of anything I hear from any source. I am in a camp right now. I cannot listen to, because I did this. I was on TV, right? Like I'm on CNN. I flipped over to Fox. There was this like, they contradicted themselves. They said one thing and then they turned around and said it completely differently. And there's no way that any of us are like in the know. And so whenever I'm here, people will be like, well, I know, or like, I'm really confident about like, da, 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 da. I'm like, you don't know shit. Like you don't know shit. And so
Right.
for those of you who like live under a rock and don't listen to news and what's going on, I see you. I get you. I understand you, and there's no shame because you do not have any control over the politics happening in Israel. You don't have any control over the social agendas of candidates here in the United States. We do not have control. So what you do have control of when you are struggling with your depression, anxiety, whatever the mental health stuff is, it's not your job to take on all the problems of the world. They are going to exist no matter what. Your job is to come back to you. And if that means you don't know what's going on right now, there's a hurricane coming through Florida. I do encourage you to watch the weather, but like that's right. Like that's it. I really feel so strongly about it.
Right. Oh no, I am right there with you. Right. And that's again, another thing with my husband and I. He is constantly, that's the first thing he does, watches the news, watches it. I used to be that, right? And then I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really impacting me. And I'm not doing anything differently, right? That's what goes on in my mind. It's just like, so my husband, when he's talking to me about one thing, and again, a lot of politics around me, right? And everybody like wanting to talk about it. And I'm just like, are you going to do anything about it? Like, what are you doing differently in your life, knowing this information? If you're doing something differently, then okay. But if it's just like instilling fear or hatred or whatever, like, I'm not going to subscribe to that. And it was interesting because, again, it's like I have been called ignorant so many times, or just like this toxic positivity or whatever. And this just happened like yesterday, I think, with my husband, where he was just like, you don't even know what's like, you just keep on living in your la la land. And like, I can let that roll now because I understand it. Like, I know what I know. Like I do. I keep up with some of the news, bits and pieces, small pieces of just knowing what's happening, but I don't inundate myself with it. I don't, like I'm not engrossed in it. And I choose to just recognize it's like, I don't believe anybody actually. Like, I don't believe anybody. So I just, I'm going to do what I can do here with my gifts and with my family and with the people that I come into contact with, and continue to spread love and compassion. And if that's living in my la la land, then so be it. At least I'm going to like die knowing that I, did everything I could to spread compassion and love, which is a value of mine, So instead of fear and hatred, absolutely.
And living in your purpose. Like there's not a lot of purpose unless you are called to be a social activist. And that is what, like, if that is your calling, you go do you, boo. If you don't struggle with the depression and the anxiety that comes with a lot of that information, you go do you. But if it's not worth, my point is overarching is nothing is worth your mental health.
Our mental health.
Nothing.
Yes. Absolutely. That's a choice too, right? Turning off the radio, turning off the news, or just knowing enough, right, with the weather and things like that to move through, the space that is important for you. But like truly, oh my gosh, like how heavy it was when I remember just listening to like NPR, even like all the way into work. Woo! I'm like, yay, there was like a story time in there too. Like, I can't remember what they were talking about. Like it was something positive, but then it was like all negative. And I was like, So anyways, yes, be aware of what you are surrounding yourself with and consuming mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like on the TV, on the radio even, or like radio, that's how old school I am, on Spotify, it's, even listening to like, I know some people love like murder mysteries and stuff like that. That's heavy too. Just like, watching horror films is heavy. And, but so just be aware of some of that stuff. There are choices every single day that we can make that actually create a better feeling. I can choose to focus on all the negative that's happening, or I can choose to focus on the gratitude that I have and the pieces that are working and the people that are around me and, whatever I do have, because abundance is all around us. So
and give yourself grace, because you will not do it perfectly. Give yourself grace.
Absolutely. So that is happy Mental Health Awareness Month. How are you taking care of yourself? We would like to know as well. So send us messages. If there's anything that pissed you off, let us know. If there's anything that you're like, hell yeah, let us know. I remember listening to something that when you were talking about like social activists, real quick, where it was just like, it's important to have like passion or no, it was like anger and love creates passion, right? And like, so like being angry about like, this is what's going on, and like recognizing what you want to create in the world and what you love, that's what's going to move us forward. So anyways, I thought that was pretty cool. So anyways, thank you so much for spending another episode with us here at Sit Crooked Talk Straight. We are always sending so much light and love, and don't forget to stay curious with yourself, with other people, with what's going on. That is what helps us stay compassionate and always let your light shine, because it is within you. So shine that out so that we can all see you and find you as the beacon of light that you are. Mwah!
Yeah.